All right, guys. So it is time for another Attack the Meta video. We have a Materia Cup coming up this weekend in Chula Vista, California. And as in normal fashion, I have kind of taken it upon myself to do this without Oscar just because we're busy. And Oscar's going to rebuttal everything that I say in this video with his own opinion, I hope. But we have a Opus 22 tier list before the Chula Vista Materia Cup. Of course, it's by us.
Yes.
Know very little. So I guess just to briefly explain, if you haven't seen one of these types of videos before, the tier explanations in this video are not necessarily like S tier decks aren't the decks that are going to absolutely win. We say they are S tier decks because they're going to be heavily expected at the tournament, and you need to have answers for these. So the tiers are more or less explanations for kind of how prevalent they're going to show up. And we have basically 4 tiers. We have the S tier, A tier, B tier, and kind of everything else in the rogue tier. If you play Final Fantasy TCG, there's a very good chance that you've purchased cards from Nerd Labs already. Nerd Labs has nearly 2,000 completed sales in just over the last 11 months or so, with overwhelmingly positive feedback. We're on TCG Player, but just as a little hint, if you follow the link in the description, there's no price floor when prices are updated on a daily basis. Always happy to support the stack. Let's get back to the video. We can just go ahead and jump into our S tier really quick. So after Chicago, we saw in the finals a Chaos Arc deck and a Tori Kelly special. It's such a unique deck. I don't know that you can really call it something like, it doesn't really have a name. I mean, guess you could say it's monsters, but it's not really monsters. It's kind of like Furion aggro monster control.
Yeah, it's got a pretty good amount of monsters and forwards in it.
Yeah, it's kind of just like, it literally is a Tori Kelly deck, and it's perfect for him, and that's why he does so well with it, is because it's his magnum opus. It is his creation that he has poured all this effort into, and it's starting to really, really pay off. Not only did he win Chicago, he went to Puerto Rico and won literally the same or the next weekend, which was wild. I can't. That man is insane. So, even though that was the best deck, so to speak, of the day, it did technically win. I don't feel like it's going to catapult that style of deck to the most prevalent deck in the room. I just don't see that happening personally.
Yeah.
I do feel like we basically have 2 S tier decks, 2 decks that if you can't beat these 2 decks, I would highly recommend playing something else, unfortunately. Either that or you need to have some serious outs to these 2 decks. Something that you at least can push your win rate to hopefully a 50-50 at the end of the day. The 2 main decks being Refia Control and Chaos Arc. There's multiple different flavors of both of these. 4-color good stuff and Time Magic Barts for Refia Control. Recently we talked about Time Magic Barts kind of falling off, but it really felt like in Chicago I personally saw one in top 32, and I'm pretty sure the other one that you and I both were watching, Oscar, for that top 32 round was not a Bart's deck. I don't remember seeing him play any Barts while we were at least standing there watching him. But either way, both style of deck kind of do their thing in their own sort of way, and I think it really is going to depend on the player and kind of what they're more comfortable with. I think it is going to be more prevalent to see the 4-color good stuff. I don't feel like Time Magic Barts has proved itself in terms of its longevity at a tournament. It has topped and it has won, but it's still, at least from my experience in the room, doesn't feel like it's nearly as prevalent as 4-color good stuff. Chaos Arc, on the other hand, you've got two very distinct flavors, in my opinion. You have Ryan Chen running around with Mono Earth Chaos Arc. He's been doing that for 2 Materia Cups now. So I feel like that deck, if people aren't paying attention to it, it really blows my mind because it has so much strength in Mono Earth, but then it also runs the Chaos Arc. So it does good not only against 4-color Wool because of Chaos and Arc, but it does good against basically Chaos Arc because it's only playing 1 color. And yeah, it does have a crazy high top end, but you don't have to play like these crazy high top end cards like 4-color Wool or, you technically don't even have to play the backup Shantoto to kind of keep your opponent in a mirror match off of the Chaos Arc. Make it very uneconomical for them to drop that Chaos and then essentially just control it out from there. The other version of Chaos Arc that we saw, and what we definitely saw in the finals of Chicago, was an Earth-Water Chaos Arc. And have you watched all of the matches for day 2 yet?
I haven't watched day 2. I watched all day 1.
So I watched Kyle Peters' video, and he talks a lot about his matchup where he was playing Earth-Water Chaos Arc and Mono Wind was his opponent, Anthony Apijo, or I'm probably butchering that name. Either way, very, very cool match. Very interesting to hear his side of the story when it comes to his thought process in the game. And I was actually telling Leon about this today, that it's very interesting to hear what he was thinking in the moment, because when all else fails and it looks like there's nothing that he can do, he still had plays. He had to just kind of go for it, though. And it kind of seems to be this really common trope here lately that I've been noticing, where when you're down and or behind, whether that's in tempo or card advantage or whatever it is, board presence in any way, like sometimes you just have to be ballsy and just risk it, right? And in that match, he talks about how he drew for his final turn because he was literally drawing the last 2 cards of his deck. This was his last possible turn. And if I'm not mistaken, this could be wrong, he was going 2 turns because time and round had been called. This was game 3, and this was turn 1. So, or maybe it was turn 2. Either way, he was drawing his last 2 cards. He was not going to get another turn after this, but he was expected to be able to pass to Anthony for one final turn. So he draws his last 2 cards, and he has enough CP basically to cast Mind Flare, and then Une it back, and then cast it again. And the reason that that's important is because Anthony has like 3 or 4 cards left in his deck. Now, Mono Wind, of course, draws, and it combos off very well, so it's one of those decks that can get really low on deck size as well. So his thought process that he talks about was, all right, I understand that there's only like 4 cards left in his deck. How can I make him draw all those cards? Because if he draws all those cards and I pass turn, he naturally loses the game. So he starts like looking through everything that he's got, and he realizes that he's only seeing 2 Zidanes. He's got an Opus 16 Zidane on field, if I'm not mistaken, and then there's one that's either in break or that had been removed at some point. So he's only seeing 2 Zidanes, meaning that Anthony either has one in hand that is Zidane, or he has one in deck that is Zidane. So he says, well, if I can cast Mind Flare, see the top 2, I can then basically cast whatever I want for free from Anthony's deck. That's 2 casts, right? Because Mind Flare casts 1, and then it basically says cast it without paying the cost. So you're casting this second card for free. So that's 2 casts. And then he basically unes the Mind Flare back and casts it again. So that's his 3rd cast this turn. So then out of the cards left in deck, he should see the Zidane, and he will cast the Zidane at cast 4, is basically what he's trying to do. Once Zidane hits the field as cast 4, not only does it remove one of the cards that he put back at the bottom of his deck due to Mind Flare, it removes one of those cards, but then it allows him to attack, and he has to remove another card. So he effectively is going to steal 2 cards from him and then Zidane 2 cards away from him in the same turn. And as this man is explaining this, it is fucking mind-blowing me. Like, this is like, holy shit, that's so fucking galaxy big brain that I never would have thought of that. Like, I was just super impressed with how, like, his train of thought carried him that far. I won't spoil the match for you, but I will say that that thought process is just amazing. I value that type of content and that type of commentary over those types of games so much at this point in my learning of the game. So that just kind of goes to show the whole reason that I told that story. Chaos Arc drew its last 2 cards, and it was trying to find a way to make the opponent draw or use their last 4 cards in deck. What that means is that a viable strategy, in my opinion, a viable strategy to beat Chaos Arc at this point, truthfully could be just to wait them out. They are the type of deck that they are going to stall you, right? They're going to arc your board. They're going to make you discard. But if you have a way to prevent them from poking you, whether that's with just overwhelming board presence to where, like, if you just played, a ton of just 2 CP forwards that they couldn't, like, get rid of, and you always had some type of advantage that you were gaining back from your forwards being arced, like, and I'm not saying this is the best idea in the world, but think about something like Vikings, right? If you had something that not only, yes, it's a small body, it's cheap, and I can just kind of like build up board presence with it, but then once they start dying, that's fine because I will still retain some sort of card advantage. You get a little risky there because are you going to deck out before they do? That type of thing, is a very legit concern, but it seems like Chaos Arc is pushing the limit of drawing 50 cards. And if you can just make them draw more than you do, that could actually be a legit strat to win. So,
yeah.
You have anything else to say about the... do you agree, disagree, or have anything else to say about the S tier?
I think the S tier... don't get me wrong, these decks are great. I believe they belong here. But that doesn't mean these decks aren't beatable. You can be playing any of the rogue tiers, you can be playing any of the other stuff, and still have a good matchup against some of these decks. This is just a deck that you're going to see a lot of, and they're probably going to do good because there's such a presence there. Like for Chaos Arc, I know if you run aggro on it's more of a setup deck, so you might have a good chance against a Chaos Arc deck, as well as Refia. I think it just depends, So these are very good decks, but they can be beaten.
Yeah, they're definitely not impenetrable. I think they're S tier, kind of going back to the reason that we're calling them S tier is because they are just going to be prevalent. They are going to outnumber the other amount of decks that are at the tournament. Like, I truthfully feel that you are statistically more likely to see Refia and Chaos Arc more than any other deck in the format right now.
Yep.
Which kind of says a lot about my Chicago matchups because I did not. I saw 1 Chaos Arc all day 1, and I saw 0 Refia control. all day one.
Mm-hmm.
Which brings us to the A tier. So this is more like what I saw in Chicago, and Oscar probably saw a couple of more of these, more than I did, but I specifically ran into Knights multiple rounds. I started the tournament off playing Mono Water, and like I said, Chaos Arc was there, and then I played some, like, I was in like a really weird seat pattern, so I was like playing a little bit of the rogue stuff as well, so I saw a lot of rogue. I think I saw like 4 legit, like what I would have considered meta decks, and 4 rather rogue decks. So as far as A tier decks go, in my opinion, Knights is definitely still very, very prevalent, but I do think that people are coming off of Knights a little bit in terms of just I think the amount of people that have tried the deck and like the deck are still there, but I think the people that have tried the deck and aren't as it's not really like their jam, they're just not really enjoying it. I think that's the people that we're seeing drop off of Knights. We have literally seen it almost every single Materia Cup so far. It has put up really, really good matchups in Swiss, and then it kind of seems to teeter-totter in some different areas when it comes to like top cut. So if at this point, with the amount of pass downs that we're going to get in terms of, if you place the guy who placed 7th in Chicago was still given an invite. Like, that's how far everything passed down. So if your goal is just to make it to top cut, then maybe Knights is your bread and butter. But it just really depends on kind of like if it's your play style, if you're comfortable with it. I think Oscar and I both have a very strong recommendation that you usually play with what you're most comfortable with. If you've been practicing Knights, by all means, keep on trucking. In terms of my opinion, though, I would say it is an A-tier deck at the moment. It's something that you're definitely going to see, but you may not see it as often as these two. So to go along with Knights, I definitely have Mono Earth and Mono Water here. Mono Water has really, really started to creep up lately. I saw Mono Water my first round in Chicago, and we saw Mono Water. John Schreiner made it pretty far in top cut with Mono Water. And if I'm not mistaken, I can't remember if Chocobo Joe, I can't remember how far he made it, but I'm pretty sure he was still running his Giga Wall Mono Water. And I say it like that with air quotes because he's running one 7 CP wall, and then he's running like 2 Shinryu or something like that. But it's basically Mono Water. He just runs one 7 CP wall as kind of a tech card. He doesn't build his whole deck around that. But anyways, I definitely think both Mono Earth and Mono Water kind of have a really strong position still. Mono Earth has a really high top end. And we've seen some really interesting Mono Earth decks like Sam Tool. He created, or he played it was kind of like a Retainers Mono Earth, but it had Riku, it had 4-color Wool, it had Noctis, Gladiolus, the 5 CP Earth Ignis. Like, it had like some really, really cool pieces. And if I was going to play Mono Earth, I feel like that's the version that I would play. It seems very combo-y toolbox almost. Like, it does a lot. And then, Mono Water really hasn't changed a lot, in my opinion. Just the way that we go about doing Mono Water things is still kind of the ultimate goal. It's very mid-rangey. It wants to have, 4 and 5 backups by turn 3. And once you get to that point, you just kind of draw every turn and play these threats that kind of have to be answered, or you're going to lose in 7 turns. Like, that's just kind of how Mono Water has always played to me. And then we have generic like Gigawall stuff, right? So whether it's Tyvus and Warriors or the Adia and Seifer, Cody Snodgrass has still been performing really well with the Adia and Seifer package. He was also, I can't remember where that one was at. It was one of the Midwest. It might have been the Missouri local qualifier. It was somewhere. He placed second with that. He was actually first in Swiss, I want to say, in Chicago, with that deck. So it's definitely still there, and it's definitely performing. It's just it's not being shown up in like a ton. Like people are playing it, it's just not showing up like it was maybe at the end of Opus 21 or very early Opus 22.
Right.
So in terms of A tier, agree, disagree, or have anything to add to this?
I think that's about right. I think it's looking pretty good.
Okay. B tier. So this, I think we will see a surge in monsters. I do feel like we will see some people trying to perform with a deck, not necessarily exactly like Tori Kelly, but I think we'll see some form of monsters start to creep up. And this could be someone literally trying to just imitate the Goblin Atomos Evray package that Tori basically runs. Or we could start to see the Wind-Water Bounce stuff that we were seeing at the end of Opus 21-ish. It was starting to really catch on, and people were doing pretty well with it. It just kind of never showed up at like a major tournament, I don't believe. It did good in some small stuff, but nothing at a major. I do think we'll start to see a little bit of Realm.deck somewhere. I just don't know. If you look at Materia Hunter and like decks that have been recently created, I keep seeing Realm and Realm pop up. Like I saw a Water Fire Monsters deck. I saw a Water Lightning Monsters deck. I saw, it was kind of interesting, a Water Lightning Monsters that was literally playing like 8 forwards. But it was abusing 5 CP Realm and is it 2 CP Mira, the Lightning one? Whichever one that is, the Opus 21.
Yeah.
It really interesting little deck because it was running like 17 or 18 monsters, and Mira being able to, when a forward enters, tap 1, ditch a monster, so you're effectively paying 3 CP, but you just break that forward. Like, that's some serious board control. And for her, you can just basically tap 1 to play this really cheap monster, send that monster to the break zone, and then she enters the field from the break zone. Also pretty fucking good.
Yeah.
So anyways, I thought that the Realm decks have started to be brewed. Let's just put it that way.
Yep.
And then I do think we're going to see some people trying to play some Mono Wind again. Mono Wind was... It was very interesting in that one match that I saw KP talk through. But I was pretty excited to see somebody bringing Mono Wind. Because Mono Wind is... If you watch a good Mono Wind player, you watch a really good match usually. Because Mono Wind has some really, really complicated lines, but they pay off really, really well when you see someone doing it really well.
Oh, yeah.
So, Mono Ice and Mono Lightning. I almost want to put both of these in Rogue tier. But I do think that there's a place for... so, I was on Mono Lightning in Chicago. And I know for a fact there was one other person on Mono Lightning. And yes, I do understand 2 out of 168 is not a very good sample size. But I do feel like we're still going to see a small surge in mono decks that kind of try to counterbalance the Chaos Arc. So whether that is Mono Ice, and it could be Mono Ice Control with the Kurasame here. It could be Mono Ice Aggro with Rug and Rufus. Who knows? Like, I do think Mono Ice has 2 very distinct directions that it could go. And we've seen it perform, just not as recently as the last couple of Materia Cups. And then Mono Lightning, truthfully, and this is probably bias, I will admit, I thought my deck did really well. I just piloted it a little underwhelmingly. I think that it could have done better if I didn't make the mistakes that I made. And I feel like it does have a place if you have someone that's a little bit more competent. I think that it could do just fine. So, yeah. So B tier. Any agreements, disagreements, or anything?
I think that's about right. I think that could work.
So then we go into our rogue tier. So this slide has not changed, I don't think, in the last 3 videos that we've done. So rogue tier are definitely decks that have potential to win, but you just don't expect to see a lot of them. Answers to these decks are nice, but it's not necessarily something that you should like put cards in your deck to counter something like Dragoons, or I guess technically you always kind of have to have an answer for 13. But it's more so that you're having an answer for aggro, not 13 specifically. And then, like Alisei with the Scions and stuff like that. A lot of the rogue tier decks, I will admit, seem to be very tribal. Whether it's Dragoons, Scions, or 13 is tribal, but it's category tribal. It's not really job tribal. So like certain answers like Shadow Lord kind of really help a lot of the rogue tier stuff. Shadow Lord's the one that's job based, right? Not Titan. Titan is power based. Yeah.
Job based, just for.
So the one thing that I will say is if you are not in the S tier, I love you. I am not an S tier guy. I don't like playing the meta, right? I just never have. I think Oscar would agree with that.
Yeah, I don't play the meta.
A tier. I am a little bit better, or rather, I am a little bit more comfortable playing something in A tier because it's good. We know that it's good, but it's not going to be like the most seen deck in the room. But I really don't care to play A tier either. B tier is where I like to be because A, we know that it's good, and B, it is kind of under the radar. But if you are in rogue tier, right, here's what I personally think we have started to see a trend in decks that are performing very well, right? If you look at Refia Control and Chaos Arc, either direction that you take Chaos Arc, whether it's the Mono Earth or the Earth Water, what do they have in common? Water. If you look at Knights, Mono Earth, Mono Water, Giga Wall. No matter if you're playing, Tybus and Warriors, or if you're playing Adia and Seifer, 99% of the Warrior Light decks, the 7 CP Wall decks, are playing Serra FFL, and they're playing some amount of water. You look at Mono Wind and Monsters specifically, and this was kind of my caveat to why I wanted Mono Ice and Mono Lightning to not be in B tier. But I feel like this is kind of a little bit too conspiracy theory, so I'm not trying to push this on anybody. But it's oddly eerie that water is a common element in all of these decks in some shape, way, or form. And what does that mean? Every single one of these decks that we've seen performing really well have access to one specific water card that just destroys the meta right now. Oscar, can you guess what that card is?
Let me see. Water card that destroys the meta.
Yeah, just absolutely destroys the meta right now. Every single one of these decks is playing it.
No,
Every single one
probably.
of them. That is a very good guess. That's a very good guess. That is not the card that I was going for.
What are you going for?
I am going for Limit Break Leo.
Oh yeah, that's true.
if you look at every single one of these decks, right, they all have access to Leo in some shape, way, or form. Whether it's Mono Earth, Chaos Arc, you have the ability to A, Tyro, or B, 1CP Leo, or Riku. However you're doing it, you have access to water. Some Mono Earth list, Ryan Chen was on fucking 5CP Fusoya in Chicago. Big brain play there, of course. I thought that was fucking really cool. Knights, they run obviously water for Corilla. The one like backup that they want to usually play is Larsa, and then you also kind of run Opus 18 Meath just as a search anything, but except a backup, by the way. But it runs water, so it has access to Leo. Tyvus Warriors typically have access to, it's mainly a lot of fire backups, but you have access to Firion, you have access to Yuzuki, you have all this water CP that you would naturally draw that you kind of don't want to draw unless you have Tyvus, but in a pinch, you easily ditch them for Leo. Adia, which I guess, yeah, that is a point to be made. If Earth is running the 1CP Leo, that's probably not the best way to get 3CP Leo from the limit break out of your deck. But point still stands. Adia and Seifer, like I was talking about, they run the Sarah FFL to be able to search your Warrior Elites, and that is water CP as a backup. Mono water, of course, that's kind of a given. Mono wind, the reason that conspiracy, I understand. The reason that Anthony really did well, in my opinion, is he had access to water CP in his backups. Mono Wind has access to water due to Philo, whatever you want to call her. Beautiful foil art, by the way. And the fact that you can just cast Leo in Mono Wind is just, God, that takes that deck to a whole new level, in my opinion. Because think about it, Mono Wind wants to see every single card in their deck because it just gives them a new avenue, a new line that they can take. And for a card that literally can just, you tap one and discard the card that I can't use right now and then draw a different card, that's perfect. And it creates a body that you just get to block with next turn, right? It's not like the Leo is like detrimental. The Leo could literally enter and then immediately die, and it'd still be worth playing, in my opinion. I really do think it.
That's your point of damage.
Yeah. Monsters, obviously, having access to Realm means that they typically have access to Water CP. Tori was a little wild with how he was casting Realm Sums games using the Opus 11, Opus something. The Red 13 that pay 1 fire CP, cast a card or play a forward from your hand. Not only is that like a way to cheat Realm in for a lot less than 5, but it also, I mean, you still have access to a ton of water. He's playing Poo Poo. He's playing, he was playing a water backup, Lena. He was playing Lena. So, like, obviously he had plenty of ways to get Leo. But I just think it's kind of eerily interesting that every single one of the decks that we've seen perform really well have access to Limit Break Leo. So, in your deck, do you have access to Limit Break Leo? I think that is something that you should kind of, take a second look at, take a gander at your deck list and say, would Limit Break Leo help me in this deck? Do I have a way to get free body and free card draw out of this deck? And if you do, I think it kind of could be worth trying out. Not saying that it's the end-all be-all best thing for your deck, but I do think that it would be interesting to try it and see. And then, at the end of the day, if you can cast Leo, you could potentially cast Tidus. Now, Tidus is obviously asking for a lot more, but Tidus is an amazing payoff. So just kind of throwing it out there. Leo is definitely your first step, but if you can get to a point where you can also cast Tidus in your fucking crazy-ass rogue deck, then dude, you might really have something, truthfully. So, do you have anything else to say about Rogue Tier?
No. I like Rogue Tier. I think that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I definitely agree. In my opinion about the meta right now, I think this is one of my favorite times in the meta because we're not to the point where like things are completely solved. I wouldn't say that like if you walked up to a tournament and you brought Scions, then you would just be automatically saying, "Yeah, I'm not going to win." I don't feel like if you walked up and said, "Hey, I'm taking category 13," then somebody's going to laugh you out of the room and say, "Dude, you're not winning." They have the potential to win. It's all based on what decks you're playing to beat these other decks. But at the same time, if you walked in with Refia Control, somebody's going to be like, "Oh, dude, what are you doing about the Chaos Arc matchup?" Or if you're playing Chaos Arc, "Oh, shit, what are you doing about the Knights matchup?" You know, it's one of those where it's like, it's not necessarily solved. It's still pretty open, but it's kind of like the dust has started to settle. And that's my favorite time because it feels like there's still a lot of exploration that can be had, but it's not just like play this deck or lose. I don't like those types of metas.
Yeah.
So, we want to hear from you guys. What did we miss? I have talked a lot, and I think my thoughts are what they're going to be. I'm excited to see this weekend to see A, how right I was, but B, how wrong I was. And being that it's California based, I'm kind of excited to see what the West Coasters have kind of brewed up. We obviously saw a little bit of that in Chicago, but it's going to be exciting to see, a lot of the West Coast meta game. I'm interested to see what that looks like. So, any final thoughts on your end?
We have finally been to a Materia Cup, so we have seen what goes on there.
Yeah.
And I will let you know firsthand, we've played against Knights. I did. Knights, I played against Mono Water. I've played against Refia Control. So it's all out there. Kind of get used to your matchup can be against anything, but you will more than likely see Knights, four color wool, Refia Control ish, and I've seen 7 Pool wool too. And then, so I've seen a little bit of everything. I've seen a good variety. So, what we talked about on these lists will be there. So, just know your matchup.
Yeah, my Mono Water, Earth Water Chaos Arc, Earth Wind Warrior Darkness, Knights, Water Lightning Category 8, Knights, Earth Wind Ice, one hit single away from being a great band right there, and Soiree. So I literally saw like 4 very relevant decks and 4 kind of rogue tier, in my opinion, decks. And then day 2, I got stomped. I got stomped by a lot of weird shit. But anyways, yeah, I do think it's been there. We've known like these threats have been there, but like Oscar said, they definitely are in the room. And if you don't have a way to answer the S tier decks, then you may want to consider playing something S tier. If you don't have a way to answer the A tier decks, you may want to consider playing an A tier deck. But yeah. So let us know from your experience, the Materia Cups that you've been to. If you've been to multiple at this point, that'd be very helpful. What's been your experience? What have you seen? I'll be honest with you. I haven't watched any of the Swiss from Chicago. I watched all of day 2, and I haven't had much time to watch day 1. So I truthfully don't know what was even on stream. And I know that they had 2 stream tables, so we got to see twice as many matches, in theory, as we normally would have. So some of this could be a little off in that regard. But, let us know what you think. Let us know what you've seen and what you would consider the S tier, the A tier, and the B tier decks. Really really interested to hear your guys' thoughts. So we've kind of been also kind of drawing back, doing 2 of these videos per Materia Cup. I personally didn't feel like it was adding as much value doing one pre and one post video. So we're kind of just taking it in as a pre-video where we kind of will talk a little bit about the results from the most previous Materia Cup, but the main focus will still be like helping draw some attention to the decks that you probably will see if you are participating. It's interesting to me to be able to see the progression of the meta as we make these types of videos as well. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. I'm gonna stop rambling and see you guys in the next one, I guess.
See ya.